Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily News for Thursday, February 24th. And tonight, we begin with what is being called a full-scale war in Ukraine. Russian troops have launched an assault on Ukraine that opened with air and missile strikes on Ukrainian military facilities. In a televised announcement, President Vladimir Putin threatened any foreign country attempting to interfere with the invasion with, quote, consequences you have never seen in history. Russia's military claims to have wiped out Ukraine's entire air defenses in a matter of hours. The Russian Defense Ministry says it is not targeting cities, but using precision weapons. It claims that there is no threat to civilian populations. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukrainian forces are no longer in control of the Chernobyl plant, 130 kilometers north of Kyiv. The plant was the site of the world's worst nuclear accident in April 1986, and its exploded reactor has been covered by a protective shelter to prevent radiation leaks. Advisor Mihailo Podolyak told the Associated Press, quote, after the absolutely senseless attack of the Russians in this direction, it is impossible to say that the Chernobyl nuclear plant is safe. Well, this comes as Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says NATO will defend and protect every ally against any attack on every inch of NATO territory. NATO ambassadors have increased the readiness of their forces to respond to all contingencies. NATO member Lithuania, which has borders with Russian ally Belarus and Russia's enclave Kaliningrad, has declared a state of emergency. And in response to the Russian attack, NATO has agreed to beef up its forces on its eastern flank near Ukraine and Russia. Countries closest to the conflict, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, are among those to have triggered rare consultations among NATO ambassadors. This under Article 4 of NATO's founding treaty talks, which can be launched when the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the NATO parties is threatened. While some of NATO's 30 member countries, including Canada, are supplying arms, ammunition, and other equipment to Ukraine, NATO has not. Turning to Canada's response to the crisis, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met today with other G7 leaders to plan next steps following what he is calling Russia's egregious attack on Ukraine. In a tweet, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada is calling on Russia to immediately cease all hostile and provocative actions against Ukraine and withdraw all military and proxy forces from the country. UN Ambassador Bob Rae is calling Russia's attack both a grotesque war crime and brutal thuggery. Meantime, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly has summoned Russia's ambassador to Canada for a dressing down after his country's invasion of Ukraine. The minister's office tells the Canadian press that Ambassador Oleg V. Stepanov met Ms. Joly at the headquarters of Global Affairs Canada, where she condemned him in the strongest possible terms on Russia's egregious attack on Ukraine. Ms. Joly told Mr. Stepanov that Russia has violated Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. However, China is taking an opposing stand in this war and has made a move today that could reduce the impact of Western sanctions against Russia. China's customs agency has approved imports of wheat from all regions of Russia. That means Beijing is lifting a ban on most Russian wheat amid concerns about possible fungus in the product. The Russian invasion had a limited impact on global stock markets, but meanwhile, oil prices continue to surge. North American stock markets ended multi-day losing streaks by bouncing back from steep morning losses. The losses were prompted by Russian military action in Ukraine. Gold and crude oil prices softened from early highs as the markets closed. Analysts are predicting that gas prices will rise in Canada as the Russian invasion of Ukraine will put more pressure on already surging oil prices. Travel advisories to Ukraine are also being issued. The Canadian government has released updated guidance for Canadians in Ukraine. Ottawa is warning that its ability to provide consular services in Ukraine could become severely limited. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced today that Canada has arranged for safe passage of any Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and their families who are still in Ukraine through borders with Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova. All right, switching gears here to Health Canada's approval of a made-in-Canada COVID-19 vaccine, which signals the beginning of the end of the country's reliance on foreign drug makers. Medicago's two-dose vaccine, called Covifenz, uses technology that does not involve animal products or live viruses like traditional methods. It has been authorized for people aged 18 to 64. All right, after the break, we'll be speaking with the Honorable Stockwell Day, former International Trade Minister, about the current situation in Ukraine. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on Forum Daily News. The rising tensions between Russia and Ukraine have led to a full-scale invasion by land, air, and sea by Russian forces. Ukraine's president says Russia has embarked on a path of evil, but Ukraine is defending itself and won't give up its freedom. Russia is shelling and conducting airstrikes on cities and bases, and Ukraine's government says Russian tanks and troops rolled across the border in what it called a full-scale war. Ukrainians gathered in train stations and clogged highways as Russian forces advanced from the east, north, and south. Ukraine has reported that soldiers have been killed and wounded as the Russian military rolls over the border. Russia's defense ministry says its military has destroyed various Ukrainian military facilities, including air bases. With us now to unpack this unfolding situation is the Honorable Stockwell Day, consultant and former international trade minister. Mr. Day, welcome to Forum Daily.
Good to be with you, Nima.
Now, there has been quite a few indications of an imminent invasion since Monday after Mr. Putin recognized Ukraine's breakaway regions. So for our viewers, can you give us a quick recap of what happened since then leading to the attack today?
Well, as viewers probably know by this time, it's a full-on invasion. And I think some people, Nima, thought that really Putin just had his eyes on the eastern region, the Donbass region, where there's a high Russian population. But indeed, he has shown the whole world he wants it all. He wants Ukraine. He's out to take it. And the question now is there any stopping him? Where will he go next? I don't know. Obviously answers those questions, but this is the most dangerous time worldwide since 1945, the end of the Second World War, for sure.
A dangerous time indeed, Mr. Day. Now, Russia is saying that it's not going to target cities and that civilian populations are safe, but how true could that statement be? Give us an idea of the situation on the ground right now.
Sure. Well, they've already started some attacks on cities. They are hoping that the Ukrainian people and maybe the military will just fold. The Ukrainian military cannot stand up to what Russia is throwing at them. And that's for no lack of courage on the part of Ukrainian soldiers. So Putin will either encircle and hope that those cities basically surrender, or it will get to the much bloodier street by street, door to door type of fighting. But he's hoping just the sheer magnitude, the overwhelming force will cause the Ukrainian forces to collapse.
Now, even though the Ukrainian forces are at a bit of a disadvantage here, how has the government in Ukraine responded to all of this so far?
You know, you have to admire them. They're being brave, and it's not just words. They're willing to die, and this is all admirable. But we have to be realistic here. They do not have the capability, unhelped by other countries, they do not have the capability to stop Putin's war machine. And that's as simple as that.
And talking about other countries, we've heard of all these sanctions being imposed on Russia. Tell us a little bit more about NATO, the US, and Europe's response to this.
You know, Nima, I've been saying for some time, and I think even a while back on your show here, the sanctions are not going to work. First of all, President Putin waited too long to bring them in. If you're going to bring in sanctions, you have to do it earlier so that the population of the other country starts to feel those things. The latest they said is, well, you know, we'll just cut them off of all our semiconductors and high-tech equipment. Russia has an agreement with China. China will give Russia all the semiconductors they need. One of the biggest sanctions they could have hit them with is to close down the banking system. It's called the SWIFT system, which enables international banking. They still have yet to do that. I think they might. And to shut down Putin's personal financial system, which is huge, including his, $200 million yachts and everything else. They haven't done that. I think what has happened here, Mr. Putin has seen that the West we have cut off the ability to be able to create enough oil and gas to fight a war. We have made Europe completely dependent then on natural gas from Russia. And when he saw what happened in Afghanistan, the complete failure and debacle there, He is emboldened now. China is in the wings. This is a very dangerous moment. And some of it is because we have blundered, especially on energy policy. We've shut down pipelines in Canada and the US, which could right now be shipping very precious natural gas to Europe to help them get through the winter, just help them stay alive. They are completely dependent on Russia. And that's why you see, as we predicted, France and Germany going a little bit soft right now because they don't want their citizens to be without energy.
We'll have a lot more to talk about as the situation unfolds. Mr. Day, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thanks for your interest. Bye now.
Coming up after the break, we take a look at the benefits of investing now and into the future. We'll be speaking with Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited, to discuss RRSP deadlines and the impacts of Russia invading Ukraine on the markets. Stay with us. The Canada Revenue Agency will begin accepting income tax returns on Monday, marking the official start of tax filing season. The agency cautions, though, that it will be another unique tax period as it continues to face challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The federal tax collector says Canadians need to file their income tax returns so they can receive benefits and credits that they may be entitled to. Meanwhile, investors should prepare for the RRSP deadline next week on Tuesday, March 1st. Joining us now to tell us more on the benefits of investing now and into the future is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Very good to be here. Great. Thank you for having me.
Lots happening in the world today, and in turn, lots happening in the markets today as well, Brendan. So for people that have been investing, how do you deal with market volatility, especially like now with the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, it is a funny thing, Nima, that political events seem to have very temporary effects on the market. We saw that in 9/11, where the market at the end of 2001 closed higher than it did the day before 9/11. And now we've seen the US markets were quite negative, but 2 or 3% down. And now some of the major US indices are actually positive at this point. So it's a very strange thing. So we get caught up in political issues, and this is beyond political. This is a full-on war. But the markets seem to take this more in stride than one would otherwise think.
All right, Brendan. Well, let's get into the RRSP. We mentioned the deadline to contribute is Tuesday, March 1st. But as investors scramble to make these last-minute contributions, what does a monthly contribution do to benefit investors in this time during tax season?
Well, the benefit of doing it monthly is that whether something terrible like is happening in Ukraine and Russia is happening or not, if you're adding it to it every month, you're buying more when it's lower and less when it's higher. But if you are, to use your word, scrambling to make a contribution now, it doesn't actually mean you have to do anything with it. If you're uncertain about the market and you're making a larger contribution, you putting money into an RSP and investing that RSP are two separate actions, two separate decisions. So if you're putting in, let's say, a big amount for most people, let's say $10,000 or $20,000, and you don't want to invest all that right away, you don't have to. Invest $2,000 or $5,000 of it, and then next month see how this all sorts it out and do a little bit more. But you should make the contribution in order to get the deduction against 2021's taxes, and then what you do about investing is a separate decision.
All right, Brendan. Well, talking about investment in general, we know you believe investment success is about ideas. So what would you say to someone who thinks maybe all the ideas are available online?
Well, I think that the trick with online anything, whether it's investing ideas or political ideas or ideas about the vaccine or any ideas, is that increasingly social media and online tends to be an echo chamber. What I think one wants, but talking about investing particularly, is a degree of objectivity, someone who is able to interpret an idea, to bounce an idea off of, to have someone with whom you can actually discuss an idea in a meaningful way that may not exactly echo or share your point of view. So the trouble with online is, on one hand, there's too many ideas. On the other hand, those too many ideas increasingly are focused in one particular direction, reinforcing or giving confirmation bias to what you're already thinking.
All right, Brendan, well, taking all of that into consideration, what would be your advice to a brand new investor looking into entering into this space?
Start today. Start with something. Yes, this or that or the other is happening. There's always something, large or small, to prevent you from doing it. But you don't have to do with everything you have. Start with $100, $1,000, whatever is just slightly a meaningful amount to you, and then add to that $100 or $1,000 next month and the month after. If you're particularly younger, you have something better than money. You have time. And if given the choice between time and money, particularly toward the end, most people would prefer time. So if you have time to accumulate, then do it by using this dollar cost averaging of adding a little bit every month.
All right, Brendan, just about a minute left here, but in terms of where to invest our money, what would be your advice in terms of where to invest if you're not sure?
I think for most people, particularly at this time of very low and possibly rising interest rates, invest in something that can grow. Whether it is the US market, whether it's the Canadian market, something that has the potential to actually grow with the economy. Because what we've seen over the last number of years is asset inflation, whether it's houses or French wine or all the other asset classes. But the stock market in particular has continued to grow. So if you're adding to it on a monthly or regular basis, you will grow with the economy and you won't be inflated out of having personal growth or personal growth in your wealth.
All right, Brendan Caldwell from Caldwell Securities Limited. Always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again.
Nima, thank you.
Thank you. All right, take care. We will see you soon after the break. Welcome back. As the world continues to react to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we'll take a look at how the markets are reacting to the conflict and more. Up next, Forum Daily's weekly market update with Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. All yours, Catherine.
Thank you, Nima. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly market recap. I am Catherine Murray. Well, we started the day off with the markets sharply lower, Europe down by about 4 to 5%, Asia down by 2%, and the North American markets look to be opening down by about 3% as well. All of this, of course, on the back of Russia invading Ukraine. When we take a look at the North American markets a little bit more in depth, the Dow was to open down by about 800 points. The NASDAQ was moving lower to the point where it was going to be in correction territory or bear market territory, meaning down 20% from its recent high. Having said that, we are seeing the markets recoup some of those initial losses. One of the hardest hit areas within the market has been hotels, as well as cruise lines and airlines. On the flip side, though, energy, WTI, did hit $100. We are seeing a spike in the price of crude oil on the back of supply constraint concerns stemming from Russia. Keep in mind that Russia supplies about 40% of Europe's nat gas supply and needs. Also, of course, key and critical to the conversation is what will the sanctions look like? Will they impede growth? Will the sanctions also include the inability for Germany to receive nat gas and oil from Russia? And they account for 40 to 50%. Russia accounts for 40 to 50% of Germany's nat gas and oil needs. So a lot of question marks, hence the uncertainty in the markets, and more so in those European markets than the North American markets. There is, of course, a view that there will be less of an impact on North America, given what's going on in Ukraine and Russia because of fewer trade links. But having said that, we do have to take a look at the global growth picture. US 10-year yield did decline to about 1.8%. Remember, it hit just over 2% the other day, likely in part because you are seeing investors buy bonds, so pushing up the price of bonds, putting downward pressure on that US 10-year yield as a flight to quality. The question will be, of course, whether or not the US Federal Reserve, which is set to meet next week, and also the Bank of Canada, will continue on the rate hike path, given the uncertainty and the negative impact that that could have on the global growth outlook. Interestingly, on that point, an ECB member said that the bank, the European Central Bank, should continue their quantitative easing and be open to stimulus in order to provide a cushion in case there is this continued conflict, obviously surrounding Ukraine and Russia. We also, of course, heard from the BOJ governor, Bank of Japan, reiterating no immediate plans to dial back massive stimulus. So it'll be very interesting to see what the US Federal Reserve does next week. Remember, in the marketplace, it was almost pricing in a 50 basis point increase. Maybe it'll be 25 basis points. Will the Bank of Canada raise rates as expected? Maybe ever so slightly. A lot to watch for next week. In terms of other items within the marketplace, as I mentioned, WTI is spiking today, oil that is. The Canadian dollar, though, not following the price of WTI. It seems though investors are buying that US dollar again as a safe haven play. Away from that, on the Canadian stock front, the big banks in Canada are reporting this week. We did hear from Royal Bank. They did post a nice first quarter beat, helped by strength in their wealth management business, but the stock is trading lower, likely a little bit more a reflection of the overall market. Loblaws did report a better than expected fourth quarter earnings. That stock is up by about 3-4% right now. Moderna in the United States on the biotech front, they also had a nice earnings result. Revenue beat expectations. That stock's up by about 11%. And Alibaba, their revenue missed expectations. That stock traded down by about 11%. Just wrapping up here, I'll leave you with this. UBS has surveyed 16 major political events since about the 1960s and found that the median market drawdown was 4% over the following 6 months. Let's see what we have in store. Watch the central banks next week pretty closely. That'll give us a bit of an indication because the tightening cycle is one of the biggest headwinds aside from the Russian invasion in Ukraine that investors are having to grapple with. I'll leave it there, Nima. Back to you.
Thanks for that, Catherine. As usual, lots to keep our eyes on. For more analysis and news on the markets and the financial world, be sure to tune in to Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops Here. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, or follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.